Hey guys, welcome back to CS tutorial session 23. In today's session I will discuss about the access modifier in CS, where you can get to know the public, protected, internal and private access modifier in CS, and then accessibility table for all types of access modifier in CS. So what is access modifier? So whenever you are creating any class, you are creating any method, you are declaring any variable, right? Every time you need to define some access modifier, right? So that, right, you can set the access type of this different type of variable or method or the class. So access modifier used to set the access level or visibility for classes, field, method and properties. Access modifier are keyword that define the accessibility of a member, class or data type in a program. These are mainly used to restrict unwanted data population by external program or classes. There are primary four access modifiers available in CS: public, protected, internal and private. So what is public? The type or member can be accessed by any other code in the same assembly or another assembly that reference it. The accessibility level of public members of a type is controlled by the accessibility level of the type itself. The code is accessible for all the classes. Private, the type or member can be accessed only by code in the same classes but not other classes. If you inherit the class to the other classes, that is also not possible. You cannot access those variable or the method for the private into the other classes. Protected, the type or member can be accessed only by code in the same classes or in a class that is derived from that class. Whereas internal, the type or member can be accessed by any code in the same assembly but not from other assembly. In other words, internal type or members can be accessed from code that is part of the same compilation. What is assembly? An assembly is a collection of type. It can be classes, interface, etc. along with resources or data. They are built to work together and form a logical unit of functionality. In case user declared a field with a private access modifier, it can only be accessed within the same class. If user try to access it outside the class, it will throw an error. By default, all member of a class are private in case user do not specify any access modifier. So in case you do not specify anything, right? So by default, it will be always private. So this is the accessibility level: private, public, protected and internal. So public is accessible in entire program, entire classes, current assembly, derived type with current assembly. Whereas private is only accessible in that particular class itself. Right, entire program, entire current assembly, derived type with current assembly cannot access the private variable or method. Whereas protected can be accessible in that classes as well as derived type with current assembly. It is not in the remaining one. Entire program, current assembly is not possible. Internal except entire program or derived type, right? It is accessible in the containing class, current assembly and the derived types with current assembly. So that is the accessibility table for all the important access modifier available in CS, like public, private, protected and internal. Now let's see how we can use the access modifier, right, uh, into the class level. So I'll go to the Visual Studio, and this is the class default class program already created, right? So we'll create some variable here. Okay, so let's try to create some variable called private string with different data type, right? Say private var equal to, I can give anything called private variable in program class. So that is the private variable, right? Then I will be creating a variable called public. Say public int I equal to 20. Then I can create some variable called protected int, say j equal to 30, right? I can create one thing called internal say string instead of private var I can make it internal variable. It is not the correct one, so private variable. Okay, so internal variable, and one variable I will create where I will not define any data type, right? I mean, sorry, access modifier, say integer k equal to 40, right? Okay, so now these are the 5 different type of variable I have created. Okay, where I have given 4 access modifier for the variable: private, public, protected, internal in the program class, which is the default class here, right? And another variable I did not given any access modifier. Okay, now let's create a object code instance for the program class in the main method. Okay, I'll be creating it now. With the help of that object, let's try to access one by one. Console.WriteLine. Okay, with the help of the object I can first try to access the public modifier. Let's try to remove it. So what will happen in case you are able to access the public access modifier variable, so it will be definitely accessible without any issue from that program class. Okay, you could see here 20 is getting displayed because from the program class, right, we can access, okay, containing class, we can access all the, right, public, private, protected and internal. Okay, so that is also possible. Now let's try to access the protected one, so which is nothing but the variable j. Okay, I will try to access it. So now let's run the code and let's see what is happening. So j is 30 also will be coming, so we can access it from the default class, which is the program class. It is working fine. Now I can try to access the other string variable, right? Let's try to access the private. So this is the private var. I can also access it, and I can also access the internal var, right? So let's try one by one. So I can try to access the private var. So you could see the private variable in the program class is coming from the program class. Then I can access the internal var, also internal variable also. So from the, in case, right, any variable you are defining, right, in that by default program class, and in the main method you can access all the type of variable. Okay, one second, let's start it again. Yeah, you could see internal variable in the program class is also coming. Now we have created one variable, right, where I did not given any access modifier. So here, in case you are did not giving any access modifier, so by default it will be private access modifier. Okay, so in case you want to access that one variable, right, so definitely you can do it, and you can also access it easily, right? So let's try to go with k. Now you could be able to see, you could be able to access it. Though in case you are not defining any access modifier for any kind of variable, it will be by default, it will be private access modifier. Similarly, you can create a method, right? So say I will be creating a method called void test, right? And maybe console dot write line, say I can give the objective called test method in program class. Okay, so I did not given any okay, so I need to give that access modifier, maybe public I need to end with colon, right? In case you are not giving also, it's still fine. So by default it will take as a right, private. Now say in case you want to access it, so what I'll do, I'll comment it out, and now I want to access it. So what I will do, I will be using object dot test. So by default it will be private. That method will be private. If you start running program, you could see test method in the program class is coming, right? Similarly, you can change one by one. You can change it to public, it will also work. You can make it private, it will work, right? You could see the same thing is coming. You can make it internal, right? It will still work. Or you can make it protected, but from that similar class it will work, which is the default program class. You could see it is still work. So from in that particular class itself, right, you are able to access all the access modifier, right? Public, private, protected, or internal, right? Either it can be variable level or it can be method level in the main method, and there should not be any error at all. The next thing, I will try to create one more class, right? And in that class itself I will try to create some more variable. So I will be defining a class, say student class. Okay, student is the class, and here I will try to define some variable. Okay, let's first go with public. Public, say integer student roll number, and I can give something called, say, equal to 3. Student roll number is 3. That is my public variable. Then I can make something called private, say string student name. That is the variable. I can give something called Rahul, right? So this is my private variable, and I can go with some other variable called protected. Protected, say string class name, say class name maybe say 8 standard, the student is studying, right? So that is the variable I have defined. Then I can create one more variable called internal, right? Again string type, right? I can create section or student section. Student section, say equal to a section. Student is right, maybe 8 class a section. So that is the section. So public, private, protected, internal I have defined. Let's try to define one more variable without any access modifier. So integer student age. Okay, so let's student is starting at 8. Maybe it's like I can give it 13. Okay, so that is the student age, so integer. So in case you are not defining anything, so by default it will be private access modifier, right? It is external class or internal class, does not matter. Okay, now let's see, let's try to create a object here in the main method. Okay, now I will try to create a access modifier in the main method. Okay, so say student. Okay, this is the object I have created. Now with that object I will try to access one by one. First, public variable. So what is the public variable? Public variable is your student roll number. You could see student roll number. That is the right. That is the variable I have defined at public level. So definitely, in case it is other class, right? Still, I can access that variable easily, and it will not throw any error. Now, if you run your code, you could see here, it will not be throwing any error. So you could able to access this variable, right? Free is able to access it, not be a problem. Now next go with the private variable. So in case you are able to access the private variable, so what will happen here? I can just keep it here, okay, or maybe comment it out. So instead of student roll number, I can just access that student name which is private. Now in case you want to run it, what will happen? You could see that error came, right? If you copy it and if you just go to the notepad and if you paste it, so that error will be coming, right? CS0122 error type, and student, that is the class, student name is the variable, is inaccessible due to the protection level. So that is the error is coming, right? You cannot access it. Okay, you cannot access it in case it is a private. Okay, now I will comment it out, then I will go for the other one, other variable one by one, right? So this is the private, you cannot access it in the main method because it is defined in the other class, not in the default class. Then I can go with the protected, which is the class name. Now let's see what is happening with the protected class name. If you try to execute it, it will still show the same error, right? So you cannot access also the protected also one, it will still show the same error. You could see student class name, that is the variable, is inaccessible due to its protection level, so you cannot access it, right? Same error is coming for the class name field, which is the protected variable. Now you can go with the other variable, right, which is internal variable. So let's try with the internal variable. Now let's comment it out. I will go with the internal variable. What is the internal variable here? Internal variable is student section, right? Now let's just replace it here. Okay, now let's try to run it and let's see what happening. So internal variable, right, you can access it. You could see, right, 8th A section is coming. So public and internal variable, though it is right in the different class, you can access it. You could see containing class and current assembly, right? You can access it in the current assembly. So what is assembly? Assembly is a collection of type. It can be classes, interface and resources. That is the reason, right, you are able to access the internal and public in the containing class as well as in the current assembly, but it is not working for the private or the protected, right? So protected still can be accessible in the derived class. I will show you. Now let's go with the default one, right? So that let's comment it out. So whatever I have created as a default, so what will happen for that one? Default will always consider as a private, though you are not mentioning anything. So this is the default, right? I did not access any modifier here for the student age, but it will be still the private. That is the reason, in case you want to access it, it will still throw the error. You could see here it is throwing the error. You can copy it and you can paste in the notepad, right? You could see student age is the variable name is inaccessible due to the protection level, right? So that is the way, right, you can deal with this kind of stuff. Now we will see, right, in case we are using a derived class, then what will happen? So how can we do the inheritance? So this is our class, right, program class, and I can inherit that student class in the program class. So I need to copy it, I need to give the colon, and I need to paste it here, right? So it's already derived. So after derive, right, in case you want to still access the default, which will be private in nature, you cannot access it, or any private variable you cannot access, same error will come. Student age is accessible inaccessible due to protection level. So in the derived class also, right? Sorry, I need to create a object or instance here for that derived class. So that is the object already created. Let's cut it and let's paste it here. And with the help of the new object, derived class object, let's try to access it. Okay, it will still not be accessible because the private cannot be accessible in the derived class also, right? You could see student age is inaccessible due to protection level. But for the derived class, I can access the protected variable. Okay, let's try to access the protected variable in the derived class. So what is the protected variable? So protected variable is class name, which was not accessible in the main method before inheritance happened. But I already derived that particular student class in the program class now, so I am able to access the protected variable. You could see that is coming now. There is no error at all coming. So that is the way, right? You can deal with the different type of access modifier. So here, based on the diagram here, right, public will be accessible everywhere, entire program containing class, current assembly, derived types and derived types within the current assembly. Whereas private only accessible in that particular class, not accessible in anywhere. Whereas internal can be accessible in the containing class, current assembly as well as derived with the current assembly. Whereas protected, right, it can be accessible in the derived types with the current class and the containing class, but not in the current assembly. So that is the way, right, you can deal with the different types of access modifier in C has, primarily public, protected, internal and private. So that's all from today's session. Thank you guys.